Hey, listeners, before we get started today, I want to give a quick shout out and word to our sponsor, our very first sponsor, Rapido Solutions Group. Danny Frisco and Roberto Icaza, two longtime friends of mine, guys I've known for 10 plus years, the CEO and COO respectively and co-founders of Rapido Solutions Group. These guys know what they're doing. I'm excited to be partnered with them to give you a little glimpse into their business. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently, operate on par with U.S.-based teams, and deliver superior customer service. These guys work with businesses from all sides of the industry, 3PLs, carriers, logistics, software companies, whatever it may be. They'll build out a team and support whatever roles you need, whether it's customer, carrier sales support, back office, or tech services. These guys know logistics. They know people. It's what sets them apart in this industry. They're driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry and a passion to build better solutions for success. In the current market conditions where everyone is trying to be more efficient, do more with less, nearshoring is the latest and greatest tactic that companies are deploying to do so, and Rapido is a tremendous solution for you. So check them out at gorapido.com, and thank you again for being a sponsor to our show, a great partner. We look forward to working with you. And to our listeners, that's it. Let's get the show on the road. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I've given you about 3 weeks off from our last episode. That is my fault. I don't want to admit I've been slacking, but I did start a real job. You guys know I've been looking for gainful employment for about a year now, so I did embark on my new role at Mastery. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about that today, though, because I've got a wonderful guest here, CEO of Truckstop, Kendra Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. And congrats on the new job.
Thank you. Long time coming. I spent a year doing nothing. And I don't know if you've taken a year off before, but it's not for someone like me.
Yeah, you get antsy. I have definitely taken 10 months off. I found, though, that it took me at least 2 months to completely decompress.
Like physically to get yourself to a place where you...
Right? Like in the mental state where you could appreciate, I don't actually have to do anything today. I could do nothing today. So, that takes a while to shift into that gear.
It takes a while to turn that off. It also takes a while to turn it back on if you've been gone for a while. So as someone who spent a year not working, jumping back into it it's 8 a.m. We should be productive
That's right.
At this point versus laying in bed. Not that I'm admitting that that's how I spent a lot of my time.
Right. No, you never would have done that on your year off. No, you were up and at 'em at 7 a.m.
Every morning, grinding into nothing.
Into nothing. Exactly.
So let's get this thing going. I was contemplating a number of ways to start with you. I think similar to a recent episode I did with another freight tech CEO who didn't come from the industry. I always find it interesting to figure out how to jump into your background well enough. So what I learned was that you were an international studies major at the University of Chicago, and I chose to start there. So what dreams did young Kendra Tucker have at 19, 20 years old as she was trying to figure out her life? I assume it wasn't to one day be the CEO of the Hinge for trucking. At least not yet. So
not yet.
Take me back there. Where was your head as you were in school and what you were trying to do with your life?
As a young 20-something on the University of Chicago campus, where if you know anything about UChicago undergrad, you're really just trying to survive it. One of the things it's really proud of is being on a list of 400 party schools in the stack ranking. We were number 399 in party school ranking. And so, that we put that on t-shirts. So it gives you a sense of the kind of nerd level I was at back in the day.
I respect that.
Sure. I mean, now I guess I can. At the time, it was not very cool. Anyway, international studies, if I can be super honest, I will tell you one of the reasons for the international studies major was really simple in that I could string together all the courses I wanted to take And when you strung them together, they made up an international studies major. So it wasn't that I was like, oh, you know what? I'm definitely going to be Secretary of State, or I'm going to be traveling the world or working for the State Department. It was literally like, I like taking Spanish. I want to take econ, poli-sci. I'm originally from the Bahamas. And so I'm just international in and of myself. And so I put all of those things together and I got an international studies degree, honestly. At that point, though, at Chicago, it was all liberal arts. So Chicago didn't even have accounting classes or, basic things that you could use in the real world. And so one of the things that you could do on the campus was take your degree and over the summers work for consulting firms or investment banking. And so that was actually my path, was to take my liberal arts degree and figure out how to get into a big consulting firm or iBanking. And so I tried that out. I worked for a summer actually at JP Morgan between my junior and senior year on the trading floor, which was really very cool. I got an offer at the end of the summer and I turned it down because I was like, I'm not
Why?
sure. Because I was like, I don't know. I can't work 100 hours a week. It felt like a lot, right? It was a lot. So instead, I took a consulting job at the Gallup organization, which was a great start to my career. But yeah, I had no grand plans for the use of the international studies degree.
And you found your way to CEB, right? And that's
Yeah.
where you spent the bulk of your pre-freight career?
Yes. I spent something like, I don't know, 12 and a half years in the CEB ecosystem, which is, it stood for the Corporate Executive Board. And the best way I can describe that business was, one, I talk about it as original SaaS, so original software as a service, because when I started there, I don't even know that SaaS was yet a thing. It wasn't it
Wasn't
yet.
yet a cool
No,
buzzword?
it wasn't a thing at all. What CEB did was they basically took all of these best practice ideas and processes from different functions within a corporation. So if you were a CFO, you typically had a budgeting and a forecasting process. Or if you were a chief sales officer or a senior sales leader, you knew how to build a BDR organization. And CEB took all of those different best practice ideas and processes and documented it. And I describe it as like putting it in a virtual box, which was essentially our website, packaging it. So we turned it into a product, and then we sold it on an annual basis for a subscription. So those subscriptions were tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. And this was so insane at that point. I don't even think we realized how great it was. We built a $500 million business organically doing that.
And what was your role in that? So you started at the bottom, right? It was like a analyst or salesperson.
Yeah. I started at the bottom in the product organization. So being one of the, pawns that was going out to the execs or the companies collecting their artifacts, which is what we call their documents that they used to template their processes, and then doing tons of interviews with the customers, right, the companies, to understand how they developed it, what they were doing with it, and then going back to the team and trying to put it into the product that we would then publish, right, as a document on our site. And so I did that for 6 years and rose the ranks in the product division. I got really good at talking to our customers. And so the sellers, the sales guys would always say, Tucker, come join us on this call. And they somehow coerced me into doing their job. And so I liked it in the end. I loved talking to the customers. I loved hanging out with the crazy sales guys. And so one day, a sales leader called me. He's like, hey, I hear you're pretty good at this sales thing. And I was like, I am. he said, yeah, that's what the sales guys are saying. He's like, why don't you come over to sales? And at first I was like, no, I'm a product person. I can't go to sales. And then we started talking about like what you actually do in sales. And then he started talking to me about the commissions checks. And I was like, I got to go to sales. so
You should have led with the money.
I know. What his sales pitch to me was, you're doing these jobs for the sellers right now, and they're getting the commission. And I was like, why am I doing that? That's not wise. I should change that path. So anyway, then I moved into sales, and I did that for the next 6 years. So I learned a lot.
So I'm curious the lesson in, because it's interesting, you had a product role by default, but the way you described what you were doing, I mean, you were getting out in front of the customer, understanding how they used the product, what their needs were, what could be better. I mean, you were doing the sales function. I mean, you were understanding the customer's needs and communicating them back to the team. I'm curious what lessons you feel like you learned that, you know, in you're now in the CEO role. What are some of the early lessons you took from that you now attribute to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I am our chief product officer at Truckstop, Julia, Lauren, and I think we are super aligned on this. Even though I wasn't in original SaaS, and so I didn't have the same kind of like classically trained product experiences she's had or others have had, what I'll tell you is it taught me early on that it is really important to be incredibly empathetic to the customer. It doesn't matter if you're in product or sales, you really can't create value for them unless you understand who they are. So if you even look at me in my Truckstop role, one of the things that I did early on in my CEO tenure was I got in the cab of a truck with a Truckstop customer. You want to know why? Because I'm not a trucker. And so it's really important that I maybe go spend some time with truckers and understand what it's like to be behind the wheel for hours and how you're trying to navigate 15 to 20 apps on a screen of your phone in order to find freight, and what it means to actually do route planning, and just the whole thing. Like, the really understanding the customer's experience has always been critical to me. It's never been more critical. So if you work at Truckstop right now and you spend time with me, you are so tired of me talking about how important it is that we understand our customers. We understand the language they speak and the needs and their dreams and what they hope to achieve. Like, just it is really important for us to understand who we serve.
Well said. There's two talk tracks we're going to go down. One is the concept of empathy in business, and that we got to spend some time there. The other is the lessons you learned from that trip with the driver. So we're going to start there because that's a little,
Okay.
That's fun. You just brought us there.
Okay.
So tell me about that experience. What was the eye opening? Because you were bright eyed, bushy tailed right into the industry. You didn't know anything about trucking, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No. So I had like a stint. So I worked in private equity as part of the Vista ecosystem, and Omnitrax was one of the companies that I worked with. Okay. So not the same as Truckstop by any means, but I was delighted that when I got into the cab of this truck with David Wayne Hardy, he had an Omnitrax ELD, and I was like, oh man, I know these people. So I don't know that he thought it was cool, but I thought it was cool to see it in action and actually understand. At this point, I now really understand the purpose of an ELD and how they use it. So the first thing to know is that in getting to do a ride along, it actually takes a ton of prep work. And also, we have to convince OOs that I'm not going to cost them money. Yes, the owner-operators. We've got to convince the owner-operators that I'm not going to slow them down and they're still going to make money on this trip, right? So it takes some work to recruit the truckers who will actually let me ride with them, so that I have to make sure I don't slow them down. So that was thing one in the experience is we get access to them. We go to truck stops and we see them and we spend time with them, or we go to Mats. We just got back from Mats. So we spend a lot of time in their presence, but the ride along itself, right? We had to really carve out the time. Then the logistics of it were really important because I couldn't go the whole way. Wayne was going from Delaware to Maryland. So he was deadheading from Delaware to Hagerstown, Maryland. Yep. And then we were going from a point in Maryland to basically Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right? So it was hours that we were going to ride together, but then he was going to continue on. He ended up going from Harrisburg to the Bronx, and then from the Bronx back to Delaware. So I could only be with him for a leg. So I had to have another car that was basically following behind us. We had like the camera crew that was there. In the end, it was quite a production. So there was that. The logistics of it were a lot to manage. What was so great about riding with him was just the diversity of his experience. So he had worked for a shipper. Yeah, it was a meat producer. So he was telling me, oh my gosh, we had the best conversations. He was telling me about chicken breast and how the prime time for moving chicken breast is in January because everybody goes on the diet after the holidays.
Okay, you scared me. I'm a big chicken breast guy. It's the little. I'm not the healthiest eater, but chicken is like my honey hole. Like that's my sweet spot.
Yeah.
I thought you were about to tell me something that I didn't want to know about chicken breast.
I'm sure he could tell us that, but I, like you, eat a lot of chicken, and I don't want to know those things. So
yeah, if you ruined that for me today, I would have been very sad because there's not a lot when you're trying to be healthy like that.
I know, there's not a lot. So anyway, he moved chicken breast. He was a shipper. Then he had worked for a broker, and he'd done that for a number of years. And then he'd been out on his own as an OO, and just the experience that he had and how he could tell me about it, and the pieces, the nuggets that he pulled from each of those experiences, and how they helped him run his business was really interesting. He really helped me understand how he was using tech on his phone. And actually, we spent a fair amount of time on that journey trying to help him get the second leg of his trip. So we had the first leg, he had the third leg, but he didn't have the connector between Pennsylvania and New York. And so at one point, I think I pop open my laptop and was like, I'm on Truckstop and I'm going to help you find this load. And in the end, actually, he did find the load on Truckstop, which is really, really great. So we had a blast. I mean, we talked about everything from we were talking about gardening and growing green peppers and the shortage at that time of green peppers in the US. And then we talked about, what he listened to on the radio, and one of his stations was gangster rap. And I was like, wait, I didn't see it coming. We talked about just all kinds of things. So
that's great.
Yeah, it was a really great experience. My team was joking because they were like, you don't have any shoes that are appropriate for a ride along with a trucker. They're like, you're going to be moving like heavy pallets of things. And I was joking with them because in the end, what we were moving was bread, loaves of bread. And so I took a picture of a load of bread dropping on my foot. I was like, guys,
I'm okay. In my heels.
I survived it. I wore Timberland.
There you go. That works.
Right. I thought so.
That fits in.
Yeah. So anyway,
all right. So,
it was a good time.
So some quality lessons there. And I think I spent from the time I was 16 until 21, I spent that time period and even when I was in school talking to truck drivers and working with owner operators. They are the lifeblood of the industry, the backbone of the industry. And there's the personality is what I personally liked so much about my role. I was a carrier sales rep. So it was my job to develop relationships with these folks. And this is back in 2006, 2007, 2008. So the load boards at the time were DAT, Internet Truckstop, as you were previously known, and Get Loaded was another one we used. GetLoaded.com. I don't know what ended up happening to Get Loaded. But yeah, we'd pop onto those sites and look for trucks. And then once I talked to them, I'd try to become friends with them. And it's just the diversity of the experience of the individual and the life they've led. A lot of my guys were not from the United States. So I had owner operators from Nigeria, from Serbia, from Jamaica, from Nicaragua. And it just like, talking to these guys about freight. I mean, I enjoyed that part of the job. So I get why you enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. One of the lesser known facts about me is that I myself am an immigrant. Like I said, I'm originally from the Bahamas, and my family came here in the early 90s. I was 11. And coming here without any family being here, without any, my parents came here to go to college, or my dad hadn't gone to college. He came here in his mid-30s to go to college, completely disrupted our life in the Bahamas. And we moved from the Bahamas to Nebraska. And he spent 5 years in college.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
He got into school in Nebraska, or like he threw a dart at a map and he hit right in the center of the country and Nebraska was where it was? Like, help me understand that.
I did gloss over that, right? So it's so
Yeah, we moved
normal
to Nebraska,
me.
just normal immigration path, Bahamas to Nebraska.
Right, exactly. It's normal for me, I guess. So
No, that's fair.
anyway,
Sure.
so we were in the Bahamas. My dad hadn't gone to school. He was running a chain of jewelry stores. He was doing well, but he felt like he couldn't get ahead enough. And so he shopped himself to all these different schools in the US. And the one that gave him the best scholarship and financial package was the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And so I went to Kearney, Nebraska, and I lived there for 4 years. I went to middle school. I did like sixth, seventh, eighth, maybe it was 3 years. Grade there. I did all middle school in Kearney, Nebraska, and then I went to high school in Lincoln, Nebraska. So the point of me saying this is much like many of the owner operators in particular that I meet who are from other countries or who are from this country, the thing that I feel, I don't know, I feel like we're kindred spirits is I so deeply believe in the American dream, and I believe that they so deeply believe in the American dream too. And they're working hard every day for the good, honest living, just like my parents were when they came here. And so I really relate. I love being able to support them and then get to know them. Like, I know I don't look like a trucker. I know I'm not an actual trucker, but I feel like we have the same kind of spirit inside.
I respect that. I think for one, you don't really if you're in freight or if you've worked in at least retail, grocery retail type freight at some point in your life, you do know where Kearney, Nebraska is, and it's a perfect example of you hear a state and you're like, okay, it's not that bad to move a load into Nebraska. And then you find where Kearney is, and you're like, "Oh shit!" Sorry, I shouldn't be swearing, but Kearney is not an easy place to move a load to. There is going to be quite a bit of deadhead coming out of there.
Yeah, you need to get to like Grand Island. You've got to get to at least Lincoln.
Yeah, but I do really appreciate your perspective, which I think is the right word to think about here, because depending on how you allow your attention to, or depending on what you allow yourself to see in social media and between all the political stuff going on these days, it's like you often hear the other side of that about how everything's so bad and whatnot. But the reality is that like the American dream is still as alive as ever. And if you're willing to put your head down and do the work and make an opportunity for yourself, whether you're 11 years old moving from Bahamas to Kearney, Nebraska, or you're trying to become a truck driver, like the opportunity is there. It's just a matter of how you navigate what's in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we can use technology to help make it easier, I'm for it. Let's do it.
Plug in Truckstop. So
that's right.
Okay, so we went down that path. You actually kind of just brought me back to the empathy piece a little bit in kind of the respect that you have for all these drivers. I think largely because of the empathy you have towards them, given your own situation. But I do think something you said in talking about being a CEO and the thing that your team is most tired of hearing you say. That's an interesting thing to think about. From my time as CEO, it's like I would think about that too. Is like what is the one thing that people are probably most tired of hearing you say? And if you think about that, like that does represent like what matters to you most, I think, as a CEO, or your identity as the CEO is, what is the message that I am most often preaching to my team? And in a service type business like mine and freight brokerage like yours, the voice of the customer is the most important thing, or one of the most important things. And being able to have empathy for the position that they're in is critical. So I guess my question to you is, what are some things that you've done since you're coming into the role of CEO to kind of ingrain that kind of empathetic mindset throughout the business, other than just kind of beating it into their heads every day in your one-on-ones?
That's right. I probably have to lay off that now. So I'll talk about one of the most recent things actually I did, which is we just did this at the start of the year. I went back and I looked at the Truckstop values, which have been the same for probably at least a decade. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with the values. There's 6 of them in total. However, one of the things that was actually missing was a value that spoke very clearly to how much we care about our customers. And so we had one value that was about putting quality first, which is still really important, but we put quality first in order to serve our customers best. And so we took that value and we expressed it differently. And now it reads, put customers first. And it is our first value. So the rest are still very important. They talk about service to others, acting with integrity, innovation, playing to win, etc. But that put customers first was really important. And we got, I thought really great feedback from around the company. One of our Truckstop partners, as we call our employees internally, said, I think it's really bold that one of the first things that our senior leadership team did was for 24 was look at the values and then change it. It really sends a message about how deeply we care about being, as Julia has said, the nucleus of customer empathy, and really working hard to make sure we deeply understand who our customers are, so that way we can create products that actually bring them real value. For us as a tech business that serves transportation, Derek Leathers actually said it really well on a panel at BGSA, I think at the beginning of this year, where he said something to the effect of, we can talk about technology and transportation all day, but at the end of the day, transportation is a physical goods business. I think it's really important for us to remember that as a tech firm. We don't get to do the touching and feeling of the physical goods, but keeping in mind that you're providing tech for people that are touching and feeling and distributing physical goods is really important. Otherwise, you're going to fall into the trap of trying to build tech for like tech people. That's very different. So this is why I'm so, determined, unrelenting about the focus on understanding our customers. Is we are a tech company. We could fall into the trap of being tech people. We have to be tech people for transportation people. That's really important.
I think it's an incredible point, Derek. For those who don't know, CEO of Werner, one of the largest publicly traded asset-based carriers in the industry. I think his words are very wise there, and yours as well, and how you're echoing that. It's especially true in the trucking business, where there are plenty of companies, I would say, that have built technology for our industry that never gets used. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if the person you're selling to, quote unquote, the customer is not interested in what you're building, then your business isn't going to survive. And the interesting thing to me is that the truck driver, and I don't mean to put this connotation, a negative connotation, it's not what it is, but truck drivers in general are resistant to change. Yes. And in some regards, resistant to specifically technological change. It's a very old school industry. The average age of the truck driver, I think today, you might know this better than I do, I think is mid-50s, and not necessarily the most technologically savvy. That will change. I mean, as time will change that. But I'm curious for you specifically if there are any things you've seen or learned or points you'd call out specific to the truck driver, because that is part of your customer base and their resistance to technological change, and just thoughts you have on that.
Yes, they are. They're definitely more tech resistant than other constituencies that I've served. So, I was telling you about riding with Wayne on that trip. One of the things he said to me in the hours I was in his cab was, he's like, I'm still mad at you, for changing the system over. And he was mad. This was great. He was mad we have this, I think it might have been like the original platform that Truckstop was built on. We call it Classic internally.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 iterations ago. And he was mad that I think we had to sunset it. You can't keep it going, right? I I mean, it's just proliferating tech debt. So he's like, I want you to know, I'm mad about that. He's like, but I do like some of the new features in the new app. So it was really interesting, right, to get his perspective. We see it whenever we make changes like that. You can see it because our Net Promoter Score, which we use to measure our customer satisfaction with our product, you'll see it take a dip, and then it recovers as they start to get used to the new features again. And then to your point on that ride along, this was so great. As I was meeting some of the other truckers who were at the dock when we were when they were loading the bread, Wayne was introducing me to some of the other truckers, and the way he was
Like to get you in trouble?
No, he was really proud. So he was like, hey, he leaned out of the window. He's like, he's in the driver's seat, I'm in the passenger seat. He leans out his window, rolls it down to this other trucker who's sitting next to us, also waiting to get loaded. And he says to the guy, he's like, hey, do you know the internet truck stop? And the guy was like, yeah, I use the internet truck stop. He's like, this is the CEO of the internet truck stop.
I got her.
I know. And what was great was we haven't been called the internet truck stop in like 7 years. And so anyway, I mean, that's not a guess about the technology. I guess my point is that, it just takes a while for adoption to catch on. Anything from us changing of our platform to us changing our name. Yeah, it takes a bit of time, which is another reason why we have to know our customers so well, is so that way as we change things, we're really changing it to be more usable, less friction, and they don't just feel like it's technology that's being shoved at them. Instead, they feel like I've got more control with what I'm doing, right? This actually helps enable what they're doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I just think about the challenge of rolling out change and it can even be something so minuscule, and the change might not actually have any impact to function, but maybe it's just aesthetic, and
Right.
you just moved a button from the left side to the right side of the app or the screen, and there will be people who are unhappy with that.
Yeah.
And I get it, because I'm the same way. So I understand it. I'm curious. You mentioned the Net Promoter Score thing, and I think part of the catalyst for this question is a personal issue that has to do with me.
Okay.
And I'll at least bring it to the front so you have that context. But, when I was at Molo, I took negative customer feedback very seriously and personally almost. And if I ever saw that there was a customer unhappy with us for something, of course you want to validate the reasoning and that like we actually did something wrong or it was our fault. But I really struggled personally with not like wanting to blow up or overblow a small thing. So I'm just curious for you personally, when you see a small dip in the NPS, and maybe you can attribute it to something directly, like we made this change, I get it. But how do you navigate that personally as you're contemplating, how do I approach this as a business? Is this something we need to address, or is this deteriorating our brand? Things like that.
Yeah, we take it pretty seriously. So customer feedback in total, we take pretty seriously. The NPS we monitor, we are regularly surveying our customer base as they interact with our platform to get the NPS. So that is frequent, multiple times a day. We're capturing that. And then we look at it in sum on a monthly basis, and we can actually see it as well by product line that we have. So we use the trend line on it as an indicator. So it's not necessarily the standalone number, but rather what's happening with the trend. And did we predict it, right? Did we know that that was going to happen? Because it can go down or up, and it's hard to attribute, well, it was because of these specific enhancements, or it's because, this particular functionality didn't work or something. So sometimes you can pinpoint it, sometimes you can't. What's even more helpful, particularly as we try to design and create new product, is getting customer verbatims, as we call it. So the open text written comments that we get back. Our product team in particular, as well as our customer experience team, spends a lot of time poring over the feedback that comes in through that channel. And then we also, particularly for our most strategic customers or largest customers who are not shy about offering their feedback to us, we get that feedback pretty directly, unsolicited, and we appreciate it because then it spurs us to make really necessary changes because they are directly telling us, look, here's how my workflow is structured. Here's how Truckstop is adding more clicks to the workflow. And so can you take out some clicks, right, in order to make it easier for us or the carrier sales rep or whoever it is to do their jobs easier? So I cannot overstate how much we value the feedback because it helps us continue to earn the right to be in the workflow of our customers and it helps us build a better product for them. So yeah, we take it really seriously.
And how would you define what Truckstop is today?
So most people think Truckstop is a load board, and Truckstop definitely has a load board at its core, right? When we were founded in 95, that's where we started.
I was so curious how this exactly was going to, are we this or that, or this is part of us? So keep going.
Yes. So Truckstop is more than a load board. We are more than a load board. And the way we talk about it is Truckstop is a place where carriers, brokers in particular, can start, grow, build a business, regardless of what size they are. Behind the scenes, what powers Truckstop today is we are now a connected ecosystem of multiple products. And most importantly for our customers is that we have all these connected databases that where we can put different data sets together and create recommendations now to our customers in a way that we couldn't before. So the way our customers interact with us would be, we've got the load board, right, which we internally call freight matching because it's more than just loads on the board. It's got rates data in it. There's matching capabilities, load recommendations. So it's more than just the load board, but colloquially, load board. Then we've got RMIS, so the automated onboarding, compliance, monitoring software that we serve thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers with. And then we've got a factoring business as well. And when you look at just how they come together, it really follows our customer along the freight life cycle. So we're aiming to provide data and insights or solutions at multiple points across the freight life cycle. And it becomes richer and richer the more we connect into it, hence the connected ecosystem. So that is what we do. What we're intending to build, what we continue to build is trust across relationships in the freight industry. So we do that through the products, but ultimately a test is, have we built trust between brokers, carriers, even shippers in some instances.
So RMIS was bought in March of 21.
That's right.
Right. And then when did the factoring business start, or was that an acquisition as well?
It was an acquisition as well. So that happened in 2017.
Oh, 2017. Okay, that one's been going on longer.
Mm-hmm.
You joined the company in 2020?
That's right. Mm-hmm. 2020.
Okay, so where I'm getting at here is it's an interesting evolution of the business. I completely follow how your path makes sense there. I'm curious, when you came into the business at the time, it was more than just a load board. So it was a load board plus factoring.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, like how has the strategy shifted in your time at the organization over the last 4 years from where it was to where it is now? Like, what does that maturation look like? I see the trust aspect and I'm connecting all the dots. I'm just curious if you could put in your words how you've seen that strategy mature over the years.
Yeah. When I joined Truckstop, one of the things that was hot in the industry at large, it wasn't just Truckstop, was digital freight matching and everyone trying to figure out book it now and bidding. And there was so much conversation and a lot of investment that took place. And ultimately, I think across the industry, it certainly had some adoption, but see above, right, on what we said about carriers, OOs, owner operators in particular, being kind of resistant to doing things online. I think no one saw as much adoption on the digital matching as we all had hoped. Over time, for sure, we continue to see adoption grow, but didn't go as fast as we wanted it to. So there was a really big focus on innovation, and particularly in that space. Innovation, for sure, is still a big part of our strategy. What we've pulled more to the fore, particularly as we brought on RMIS in 21 and then Freight Friend last summer, is something that's actually at the core of Truckstop. It is the trust piece and the transparency. So with RMIS, it being an industry leader in its space, was really us securing this foothold. It fit really nicely against our load board, which our customers will tell you they trust more than any other solution that they use. And so putting RMIS right next to it only amplified, like, oh, this is a business that I can trust, that helps to bring transparency from load volumes to rates, into now onboarding, compliance, what I need to know about carriers. With Freight Friend, what that does is actually expand the trust to have more control. So as we bring it into RMIS, it will actually give our customers more ability to expand or contract, control their networks, even more than they currently do. If you think about a small to mid-sized broker and the access they have to technology that helps them to get the most out of their carrier networks, they typically don't have their own dev teams or engineers. And so with the Freight Friend technology, we can actually help them create tech now that helps them manage their networks a little bit differently and hook it in to the information from RMIS and freight matching. So now it all comes into one view, hopefully a single pane of glass that gives them more control over how they manage the network and hopefully amplifies the trust part even more.
100%. I'm not as familiar with Freight Friend, but I'm very familiar with, I know of the business, but I'm very familiar with RMIS, given that we used it. It is, has it always been, the kind of industry standard for evaluating the integrity or legitimacy of carriers. And so what I think is really interesting and quite genius, frankly, of that move is it does give you that foothold, and it puts a certain amount of confidence and trust that brokers now can have in the product. I want to not pivot, but there's similar to how there's a negative connotation that exists around the word freight broker, you could argue something similar is true for load board. And not from every perspective, but from the shipper perspective. And there are plenty of shippers I've worked with in my time who have said outright to me as we're signing the contract to work with them that we are not, they ask you, do you use load boards? And any broker that says they don't is full of it, because they do.
Yes.
But the aspect that you even feel compelled to say no, or that you want to say no, is all predicated on this negative connotation that shippers have around load boards, and that it's this kind of dirty place to go get trucks. And let me first say, I don't believe that's the case. I think that it's an outlet for, I'm sure, negative or bad actors to try to find freight. And if you only use those actors, you're going to get bad results. But there are plenty of meaningful and great relationships that have been born out of a load board, because it is a connector, and there are good carriers and good brokers who are using them.
Yeah.
But my question is around the connotation and how you think about that. You didn't mention shippers as a potential customer of yours, which I'm curious about too.
Yeah.
If that's in the future pipeline. But how do you think about that kind of negative connotation that exists around load boards, and how do you combat that type of thing?
Yeah. So the negative connotation with load boards, particularly over the past year, has just had so much to do with fraud, right? And I think we all agree fraud has skyrocketed since the pandemic correction has really been happening. It's why we have always actually at Truckstop, this is not new because of the pandemic correction. We have always had a dedicated team a team of humans and technology that actually roots out bad actors. And we have a 25-year-old database that keeps track of all of them as well. So I think last year we rooted out more than 10,000, just around 10,000 fraudulent or nefarious actors that we found trying to get into Truckstop. And so we're proud of our track record of not being a load board that's known for fraud, but rather being a load board that people say pretty definitively they can trust. So that's thing one, is hopefully just with the work that we're doing, that we continue to do, we help to mitigate some of that negative connotation. The second thing, I'm curious what you've heard, but over the past year or so, I've actually heard that since the pandemic and the capacity crunch that existed in the pandemic, shippers have a different perspective on load boards in that when things were really tight in the pandemic and you couldn't find someone to move your freight, they got a little more open with, okay, we'll deal with the load boards if it's going to move our goods from point A to point B. So I've heard from some of our customers as we go to the different conferences that the tune has changed a bit, right? Whereas pre-pandemic, there was more of what you were describing. There's now far more openness because one, they had to, and then two, because they had decent experiences, right? They didn't have the terrible experiences that they might have predicted in the past. And so there's more openness now. I'm not saying that it's completely different, but there's more openness today than there was before the pandemic, which is kind of a silver lining, I guess, of us having gone through that. So that's been my experience, at least so far.
Yeah, where I would add color is I think you're 100% spot on with respect to the changing tune that people sing dependent on their needs and wants in the moment. So when you find yourself in a very tight market like it was at the onset of the pandemic that first year, and you can't get your loads moved, yeah, you'll whatever means to move it, you'll accept.
Yeah.
And then of course market flips the other way like we've seen for the last 18 months, and you get the opposite of people, and so I think the lesson there or thought that I would point out is, one, it's hard to generalize, or we should try not to overgeneralize, because at the end of the day, there's, whether it's a shipper, a broker, or a carrier, their opinions are their own, and sometimes they're valid because they have seen enough data to support it, and sometimes they just believe it because they want to. And there's not much you can do there.
That's right.
What I'm curious about, though, is you mentioned that nearly 10,000 bad actors that you guys were able to fend off. It sounds like a lot of that work is done kind of behind the scenes, and it's not really being. It's just work that would be done behind the scenes. So if I'm a broker on the system, I wouldn't see it in my face. Like,
that's right.
I don't see them fighting off the people.
That's right.
I'm like, damn, they're really defending us. I love them.
That's right.
So I am curious from your perspective, because this is going to take us into maybe a social media type conversation. But what do you feel like there's more you could do maybe to vocalize or share that with the world around how you're fighting it, or I don't know if you had like wanted posters, like, we got this guy. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
If you get what I'm saying.
You know what? Honestly, I would tell you that Truckstop has always come from modest roots. And so truth be told, even in prior years, we haven't been the kind of company that says, look at what we've done. Over the past year, the past like 12 to 15 months in particular, we have become more vocal about what we're doing in the industry, especially as we got customer feedback. And so we got a lot of customer feedback about, here's the enhancements we want you guys to make in RMIS. And there's been a lot of discussion with our customers about, here's the dozens of enhancements and improvements we've made. Here's the partnerships that we've built in order to really respond to fraud. We've done a pretty public partnership with the FBI, who wasn't up to speed on all that was happening in terms of cargo theft, especially when we think about the early part of 2023. So our general counsel, our chief technology officer, teamed up to do a set of educational sessions with the FBI to just help them understand what we were seeing in our data on our board and then through RMIS as well. So there've definitely been pockets where we've been pretty vocal about what we've done. And then I think, honestly, we remain super open and welcoming, very willing to learn from our customers. And so I hear, like I said, I hear directly from our customers as we launch and release and announce new things. They come back and say, "That's great, and here's what else we'd like to see from you also." So I think it's not that we've gone on a PR campaign, I guess, about it, but certainly across our customer base. I can see what we have shared is really well received, and we've been more vocal about it in the past 12 months than we perhaps were before. Because, like I said, we have this database that we've had for 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it's wild.
valuable.
Yeah, it is. It is. So yeah, we've been protecting our customers against fraud for a while. And it is, like you said, it's one of those things where it's the absence of it that helps you know that it's working, right? It's the absence of it. So it's hard to get credit for the absence of something.
Yes. I agree with that. That is definitely part of the challenge. So would you say that that's the number one issue that your business is navigating today is freight fraud and how to fight it, or something else?
It's one of the most heard or discussed topics that we've had from our customers over the past 12 to 15 months. We do think that it's important because the cycle will change and times will change for us to talk about trust and not just fraud, right? Trust is more than fend off the bad guys. Trust is, how do you want to set up your carrier network, right? Who do you want moving the high value loads versus the low value loads? And how do you set up standards so that way you've got as much control as you need over that, particularly when the cycle turns. So there's more, we know this, right? We can feel it. There's more than just fraud to talk about. And at the same time, fraud can be incredibly painful, super expensive. And so we do spend, we want to make sure we're doing what we can to help our customers navigate that. But more and more, I think, particularly hopefully as the cycle turns and we get out of this last 18 months, it'll switch again. And then we'll be talking about how do you trust the capacity you're finding.
Yep. Yeah. So I think you bring up a very interesting talking point, which is kind of the need to not just play defense, but also, get out on offense. And so as you think about kind of the strategy of the business overall, what are some of the more offensive type moves that you all are making as you think kind of big picture of who Truckstop will be? How do you build more trust? Is it differentiated or new service offerings, new lines of business? How are you thinking about that today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for Truckstop, especially over the next few years. I think there are partnerships for us to continue to build with others who've done an exceptional job of building strong networks that would be complementary to ours. I think that, when you talk about, or when I describe, here's the Truckstop set of services, while everybody knows the load board, we really do intend to serve our customers across the freight life cycle. And while there's a number of nodes that we touch on that freight life cycle, there's more that we can fill in and plan to, whether that be organically or inorganically over the next few years. Our intention is to build trust at each one of those nodes through the products that we have and through partnerships that we build, and hopefully just continue earning the right to serve our customers every day. So, and that means that I don't want to lose sight of, we will continue to evolve the products that we have as well. That I know I've made a big deal of saying we're more than a load board, and we are a load board. And so it's really important to continue to drive value in that and continue to evolve as our customers need us to evolve on that part of our business while still extending it across the rest of the freight life cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I really like thinking about strategically how your business is so well positioned because, as you said, you're already touching a few nodes of the kind of life cycle, and the others you can either build and, tackle or partner with the right company, so you can still support it.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, you should be able to look at a board of like the entire life cycle of the load and say, we're helping in every aspect, whether it's something we own entirely or we're partnered with the right person. But when someone thinks of this aspect of a load, Truckstop can come to mind in some fashion in a positive, trusting
That's exactly right.
way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk about social media, because Truckstop is far and away, if there's someone who deserves a raise at Truckstop, it's whoever handles your social media account. I contemplated if I was going to put you on the spot and say that or not.
I don't know what you're talking about, Andrew.
Yeah. It's fascinating though, and I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. So for those that are unfamiliar, where should I start? I mean, Truckstop has someone, whoever their social media person or manager is, who has become very active in the last 12 months or so on the internet, on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. And they've done it with an art that, I mean, is just beyond impressive. And I think it's interesting. It's impressive because it's tapping into something that our industry is just so far behind on in general. Especially from a corporate level. I mean, I think people are just starting to figure out personal branding in our industry, but corporate branding is not something that I've ever looked at a tech vendor in our space and been like, they're really nailing it.
That's great.
But the kind of comedic touch and everything has just been really fun to kind of watch. So I'm curious, how intentional is that? Was that a directive, or someone just got overzealous and started doing it, and then you were like, huh, interesting, this is making waves?
Directive would be way too strong of a term, but how do I say this? I kind of alluded to it earlier. Truckstop has a lot of great things going for it, and we have typically been quieter in talking about it in a way that catches attention. We've been just quieter in years past, and I have created license and opportunity for us to be a little bit edgier and fun, because truthfully, it reflects, I think, who we are internally as well. We're kind of snarky sometimes, but in, good fun. And we get a giggle over, just, how it is, right? At work, you get a giggle over just funny things or passing comments. And so we're purposeful in how we built out and who we sought to bring in for social media. And across our marketing team, actually. So our marketing team has undergone a bit of change over the past 12 months or so, and it's really starting to settle in. And so the creative minds over there, it's showing up a lot on social media, but there's a team of people behind the scenes that think about messaging, that think about how we're going to deliver it, that, this us being so focused on trust as we have been for the 29 years that we've been in existence is really important for us to put that out there and showcase it, but also just be personable and relatable, right? As the people that we are behind the scenes. So the creative team, the social team is doing a really terrific job of amplifying the parts of the brand, I think, at Truckstop that we just hadn't brought to light out to the public before. So it is really fun. We have a good time with it. For sure.
I'm glad. It's cool to see. It just has it's given life to something that was lifeless.
Yeah.
And in a way that's just really, actually, I think meaningful. It's crazy to me, but like little jokes that your social media person is making on the internet, it's like hitting home with people. And you just, it's just fun to see kind of the product of whether it's, you coming in and giving that freedom or that purposeful direction. But it's hard not to think back to your comments about the importance of empathy, and then find ourselves here 30 minutes later and you're talking about the need to be relatable. You can't get to one without the other. And to be relatable, you have to have empathy for what the other side is, who they are, and be able to relate to it. So kudos and credit there, because it's hard to differentiate, I think, in the load board game. Not like I'm sure there are, I'm just speaking as someone who's been a user of all the load boards. once they get to a certain point, you're like, okay, it's a load board versus a load board,
Right.
but you've actually breathed life into this thing where it's your competitor's a little more stale in that regard. I'm not trying to get into this kind of who's who game, but
Right.
I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
So
We're having fun, and hopefully more to come. It's not just to show hopefully the industry and our customers. Here's just a little bit more that adds more context, I guess, texture to who we are as a business, but also for people who might think about working at Truckstop as well. I really want us to be able to exude, here's the kind of people we are in this business. We take our customers seriously. We don't take ourselves too seriously all of the time. And we're fun to hang out with, and we crack jokes. We laugh.
that's good.
Yeah.
So I think we'll close with this topic, and that is kind of your own path to the CEO seat. So you started at Truckstop as the Chief Revenue Officer,
That's
correct?
right. That is right.
When you came into the business, did you have your sights set on the CEO seat, or
No.
where were you at mentally with respect to that?
I was coming off that 10 months of having not worked. And and part of it was I was on maternity leave. So when I joined Truckstop, I had an 8-month-old baby, my only child. So I was trying to figure out how to be a mom, then a working mom. It was the pandemic. No, I was not thinking about being the CEO at Truckstop.
The most amount of responsibility possible was not in mind as the goal.
No, I did not have that as a goal at all. And it wasn't that in life I said, yes, I'd love to make a run at being a CEO at some point, but I certainly wouldn't have said that Truckstop was going to be the place where that would have happened. No, I did not expect it.
And so when that opportunity presented itself, Trent was the last CEO, right?
No, it was Paris. So Trent was the COO when I joined, and then he left to become the CEO at Assertus.
Yep.
And Paris Cole was the CEO. And so here's how it went was I was CRO. So I was leading the sales and customer teams for about a year or so. And then Paris, I think Trent had just left. And so Paris said, look, we don't have anyone in a COO role. He's like, I'm thinking about getting a COO. And I was like, oh, here's a profile you might want to consider. And he's like, I was thinking about you in the COO role. And I said, oh, okay. Yeah, we could talk about that. And so I did that from September until about December. And Paris, I live right outside DC in Arlington, Virginia, and Paris is in Boise. And so he said to me in December, this was December of 21, he's like, I'm going to come out and see you. He's like, I want to just spend a day with you going over stuff for 2022. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I made a whole PowerPoint deck. I was ready. And so he comes, we meet in this conference room, this shared workspace in DC, and I'm ready to go with my PowerPoint. He's like, hang on. He's like, I need to tell you something, which is I want you to know I'm going to retire in 22. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, yeah.
So you don't want to go over this deck?
Right. Exactly. It's like, actually, my first thought was like, oh man, who's going to be the CEO? Because I really love working with Paris. I'm worried. What is this going to mean for me? And he's like, and I'd like you to be the CEO. And I swear to you, I could not have been more stunned. Like,
but why?
I know. I don't know.
When he was looking for the COO and CEO, neither time was there a selfish, not even selfish, but just like a self-promotional, I can do this thought, or this should be me?
No, I didn't. Nope. So hindsight is really beneficial, right? Like you're hearing me connect the dots, but I was doing my day job, right? So when I said, hey, I came up with the whole deck, it's because I was like, Paris, here's the list of things I've got, at least on my agenda, that I think we should think about for 22. So I was in my lane doing my job. And Paris was in his lane doing his job, which I can really appreciate now as CEO. I will tell you, as I went from Chief Revenue Officer to Chief Operating Officer. And as Chief Operating Officer, I had about half of the business that reported to me. And I would describe it as my aperture as CRO was like this big. And then as COO, it went this big. As CEO, it's like this wide. And even as operating as COO, I couldn't see the things that Paris was seeing. Now I can. And so now it makes a lot of sense. Like me telling it as the story makes a lot of sense. But I was in my lane doing like just thinking about here's how we're going to execute these things. And so he really did catch me off guard. You're right. Because he'd done the same thing with me at COO, I probably should have been hip to the beat for it for a CEO, but it still caught me by surprise. So it took me a month actually to say yes to it because it is the most. It's like getting married. It's a pretty serious commitment for a business, especially as established as Truckstop, right? Truckstop is 29 years old this year, and that's a big deal. It's got Moscow before, Paris next, and then me. That was a big deal. So I had to reflect on it, and I'm honestly so glad that I get to be leading this business. It's a fantastic business serving, honestly. I love this industry. I told you for all the reasons already that I love it. It is the heartbeat of America, and I love being able to serve it.
It's hard to get out once you get back in. That's why I said your pre-freight career, because it's usually just pre-freight and then it's freight.
It's just freight.
You might bounce around, but you're in freight. And,
I know.
Especially if you get welcomed. If you get accepted into the freight community, it's really hard to get out.
Yeah,
so I get that.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much. There's just so much goodness and opportunity that exists in transportation. So I like it a lot.
Is. Well, we'll end with that because I like that note, and I could keep peppering you about being a CEO, but
you could.
I just appreciate how honest you've been and how much you've shared. So just been a really great opportunity to learn about Truckstop and you specifically, you personally, and what you're building there. It's been very cool to see that business evolve over the years is probably the right way to put it, from a guy who was 16 trying to find some trucks on it in 2006 to where it is today. You guys have built a great business, and you are building that kind of trust that you're talking about across the brokers and carriers in the community.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you being such a long user and advocate for us as well. So thanks for having me.
Of course. To our listeners, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.